Welcome back to another Friday Conversation Series episode. I am your host, Peter Zablocki. Today, I am delighted to be joined by a brilliant historian, but also a best selling novelist, Harry Sidebottom. Harry is a lecturer in ancient history at Oxford University and the acclaimed author of the hugely popular Warrior of Rome series of historical novels. Today, we're diving into his latest book, Those Who Are About to Die: Gladiators and the Roman Mind. In this vivid and immersive new work, Harry takes us through a single, intense 24-hour period at the height of the Roman Empire. From the gladiators' Last Supper the night before, through the roar of the Colosseum with its beast hunts, public executions, and deadly combats, right through the quiet or not so quiet evening after the games. Far more than just another book about blood and sand, it's a fascinating journey into the Roman mind itself, their attitudes toward violence, courage, power, celebrity, slavery, masculinity, and death. A quick word from our sponsors. Harry, welcome to the History Shorts.
Thanks for having me.
We've been chatting for a while now. This is kind of good. I feel like we're mid conversation, but you are a novelist, a really renowned novelist. What draws you to nonfiction? Like, are you like, you know what? I'm going to take a break from novels for now, and then how does that lead to this particular book?
Well, actually, it was a COVID thing because during COVID, there were no literary festivals to eat up your time. There was no face-to-face teaching in Oxford, and I thought I'll take a break from writing novels and I'll write a history book. And that was my first sort of non-fiction for the general reader, called The Mad Emperor. And on the back of that, a publisher asked me to write two more history books, and I said, "Show me the money." And they did, and my agent and I went, "Yeah, we'd love to."
Oh my goodness. What is that? What is the approach? How does the approach different to writing those things? Because one gives you so much freedom and the other one kind of boxes you in a little bit, I assume.
Yeah, that's true. But I think there's kind of a popular misconception that a history book and a historical novel are diametric opposites. I mean, they've got a heck of a lot in common in that you decide what you're going to write about, then you draw some parameters around the research you're going to do, what you're going to read, what you're going to look at, where you're going to go. You take endless notes, and then you try and rearrange the notes into a plausible narrative that will take the reader with you. I mean, I think the one thing people often go, "What, with a novelist, you can use your imagination. As a historian, you can't." I think that's totally wrong because, I mean, if you're writing a good historical novel, you're bound in certain ways by the history. But equally, as a historian, you've just got to use your imagination to fill in the endless gaps between the evidence, especially with the stuff, I do about ancient Rome.
It's almost as if the canvas stays the same, right? If you're writing historical fiction on the same topic versus a nonfiction book on the same topic, the background of the canvas stays the same. The history doesn't change, right? So it's almost like in the fiction, you could create the dialogue versus in a nonfiction, you're looking for the sources that would point to something that was said in a sense, but the background stays the same.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I don't tend to make dialogue up in the history books. I mean, that would be a no-no. But yeah, I mean, I imagine what people think, what they thought, because I do think, as I said, imagination is very important in writing history, and something that's often lacking in the drier, duller scholarly books, where you're nailed down to the evidence and kind of that's it. I mean, it sucks a lot of the life out of history.
Well, not in this case. I mean, this book, first of all, Gladiators, right? I mean, how can you go wrong? It's a first page, you're like, whoa, all right. But like, what was it about this particular topic that kind of drew you to it?
I think it's because I'd never written about gladiators and I'd never really researched them. So I like trying to conquer new fields within the classical world. So that was a draw. And then when I got into reading a lot of modern scholarship about them, I thought there was kind of a gap in the market. There are two types of gladiator books out there. There's the scholarly ones, which quite frankly are very demanding reads, to put it politely. And then there's the popular ones, which are just full of rubbish and they repeat, errors from one book to another. So I thought there's a gap. And then I thought, actually, Gladiator is very central to the Roman identity, their self-fashioning. And I lifted the idea of a 24-hour structure from an absolutely brilliant history book, which does have a lot of imagination. Colin Jones' The Fall of Robespierre, A Day in the French Revolution. Yeah, the 24-hour structure using gladiators through from the meal the night before, through the night, the big ceremonies in the morning, the animal hunts, the executions, finally the gladiators. It would allow me to use them as kind of a window to view all sorts of interesting aspects of Roman culture and explore the ways that they're sort of similar to us but different in all sorts of things we wouldn't necessarily associate with gladiators. Yeah, stuff like, I don't know, sex, sleep, dreams, suicide, attitudes to the natural world, crime, punishment. Yeah, the list goes on, as I'm
Yeah.
sure you found when you read the
Yeah,
book.
yeah, yeah. What else? The beauty of the book is that it almost the 24 hours was amazing. I love that fact that it was all happening within that 24-hour period. But I also felt like as if this was a drone and you're zooming in on one thing, but then you zoom out. You know what I mean? Like the broader, this is Rome. You know what I mean? And then these are the spectators. Boom, zoom out. These are the gladiators. Zoom out. And you kind of touched upon this right now. This idea that this book really is, it's almost like a microcosm what's happening in arena of this broader Roman way of life. Can you elaborate on that a little bit? Like what
Yeah.
were these people's obsessions? What were they about?
Okay, well, I think the first thing we're going to do is get rid of the Hollywood image that it's just all about killing and it's just mass carnage and it's huge spectacles. Gladiatorial combat was usually a duel between two very equally matched opponents, ranked by skill and experience, and either with the same or contrasting weapons. But it's not actually about death. It's about playing out virtues, courage, core building block of Roman identity. For example, the Roman explicit justification of the games, weirdly enough, stays the same over about 700 years. It is that if the lowest of the low, gladiators, guys out on the sand, exhibit, as they would have put it, courage close to the steel. Sorry, I had to do that in a Russell Crowe voice. Courage close to the steel. How much more will we guys in the stands who are free Roman citizens, if we're called upon to fight for Rome, how much more will we show than they have? It's almost a moral lesson. And I think it's kind of at the heart of Roman identity.
So you kind of went in there. That Hollywood comes calling, right? They're like, Harry, we're doing a new miniseries, or let's say Netflix, new miniseries on gladiators. We want you to be the historic advisor. And you go in that room, you open that door, and you're like, first of all, what do you start with? What is your go-to in that meeting?
Okay.
You're the historian, the advisor for the show.
I think the go-to would be, right, you've got to sack the young Russell Crowe, you've got to sack Paul Mescal. Gladiators didn't look like them. They weren't young, thin, ripped. They were probably, most of them, the heavy shield guys, the guys with the big helmets and big shields and armor. They're actually looking more like a rugby forward. These are big, heavy men.
Or Russell
Um,
Crowe now. you know?
yeah, it's Russell. I used that joke once. I used it before a live interview. I just like to apologise to the great Australian actor.
Oh no, he's amazing. I don't think anyone's. I'm not saying. I just think he got a little fluffier. I mean, he's bigger now. We're
Yes,
not saying anything about. Yes, yes, no shaming.
no shaming at all. Which is actually weird because, I mean, we have good literary evidence that gladiators were bulked up by a special diet. It's called sagina, which literally translates as stuffing with connotations of animal feed. And the idea was that the heavier the guy is, if he has, in modern terms, a thick layer of subcutaneous fat, he can take an injury from a bladed weapon, but it's less likely to pierce a vital organ. So he's less likely to actually be killed in the arena and can carry on and can fight and bleed in a very hideously visual way. So, yeah, that's be the first thing that Hollywood executives would be told, that you've got to sack the good looking, ripped guy and get someone who's basically fairly porky.
I love that. That was one of the things in the book that the diet, and we briefly touched upon it before I click record. That I found that very interesting. Like that fact that these were athletes, but designed to look a certain way for what they were doing. Like if you have someone throwing a shot put, a discus, they're not going to look like a runner. They're training for a different type of activity, and that's what you have over here.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, to use a sport that isn't that big in America, rugby union, the guys in the backs, the fast running guys, are whip it thin. They're very muscular these days, but whip it thin. The guys with the low numbers on their jerseys who are in the scrum, and these boys are carrying a few pounds because weight actually matters in certain aspects of sport. So yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it's probably not the best analogy to use for an American audience, but
They'll get it. I
as
think
long as
they'll
they get
get
it.
it. Yeah. What do you think was, again, there was a few of these like surprising moments for me here that I wasn't aware of, including the diet one. But what was like one humanizing detail when you're doing this research that kind of stopped you and you're like, oh, this is cool. It's like as a fan of history, not just as a writer, but you're writing this, you're doing the research, and you as a fan of history, you stopped and you're like, oh, this is kind of cool. What is
Okay.
there? Was there a moment like that?
Yeah, there's several, and they were from reading Gladiator's tombstones because we have several hundred of them. They're not a random cross section of gladiators because basically, if you died on your first outing when you're a novice, you didn't have the money, you weren't embedded in a gladiatorial school, you didn't have a widow, family, friends who would pay, set up a tombstone. And equally at the other end, you're not the most successful one ever because then you'd have retired and you'd be doing something else. These are the guys who are pretty successful but died in the ring. And it really is as close as we can get to a gladiator talking to us. They're often usually written in the first person. They address the passerby. I was Diodorus, the wretched, the unhappy. I won my fight, but then the treachery of the referee made the fight carry on, and I was killed in the ring. It's moments like that. Never trust nemesis. Always put your faith in your own star. Very beautiful. I'm not quite sure what the gladiator meant, but clearly it's those moments when the gap of the couple of thousand years drops away, and it is almost like the guy is talking directly to you.
Yeah. And let's kind of talk about these people that because the dichotomy here is very interesting because they were revered, but they were also kind of looked down upon. You know what I mean? Like it's like an immoral thing that what you're doing. But at the same time, these people are celebrities, these like, they weren't like it's the dichotomy there is so interesting. How does that reflect Rome, but also how does that reflect the person, in the arena?
Yeah, you're so right. I mean, because these are the lowest of the low. Gladiators are prisoners of war. They're slaves who are sold into gladiatorial schools. They're condemned criminals condemned for very, bad crimes, for temple robbing, murder, things like that. And weirdly enough, we know there were from the tombstones mainly, a serious percentage of free guys who volunteered to take on the status almost as a slave. They swear a slave-like oath to be chained, burned, beaten, and killed with steel. And so they are the lowest of the low socially. But at the same time, the successful ones are, as you say, they're glamorous superstars. And they become sex symbols, kind of unlikely sex symbols, as most of them are fairly beefy. But that's probably down to the dark glamour of violence and the fact that they are celebrities that thousands of people are cheering their name. And you do know their name because it's announced in the playbill beforehand. The superstars are like sports stars today, but at the same time, they are legally and socially almost right at the bottom of the pyramid. And yet, in terms of fame and potential rewards, they can get very near the top. It's a weird dichotomy. I think it says a lot about Rome, but it's also, I think, the guys who volunteer, which is one of the weirdest things for us. Why the hell would anyone volunteer to be a gladiator? The poet Horace, the Latin poet, great Latin poet, had a simple answer: because they're morally bad people. There you are. He then
Yeah.
elaborates, they're a specific type of morally bad guy. They're young, rich kids who've wasted their inheritance and they've got nothing else they can do apart from become a gladiator or be a carriage driver. I might have gone for that one. It's a safer option. But I think, if you take out the elite moralizing, Horace, there's a point there in the grinding poverty. We tend to forget, with all the marble and the togas and the Roman Senate and the emperors, that 90% of the population were kind of bouncing about on really a subsistence level. You enlist as a gladiator, you will be fed. Okay, the food's this, according to elite writers, disgusting stuffing, bean and barley stew. But you will get your meals a day, you will get housed, and then you have the chance for fame. And gladiators win prizes. You win the bout, you get a cash prize. And also, of course, they don't actually, we think, fight for very long. There's one ruling by the Emperor Hadrian who's asked a very specific question. Emperor, what should we do with cattle rustlers in Spain who are condemned to gladiatorial schools? And he replies, they can be condemned to the school for no more than 5 years, and they only have to fight for 3 of them. And then the fact, it seems from Gladiator's tombstones, they only fought once or twice a year. Then it depends your odds on surviving in each bout. I work it out in the book from an inscription in Pompeii that's very as intact. We've got the playbill, and then graffiti artist, has later added the results. The chance of dying is about 1 in 8 in each bout. So if you're only fighting, say, once, let's put it on the good side, once a year for 3 years, you only fight 3 times, you've got a 1 in 8 chance of dying, you're actually likely to live.
Yeah.
So
That was so surprising to me, because I always think of this, I always think of, like when
thumbs
like
down.
it all ends like this, thumbs down. But these were careers
Yeah.
for these people.
Yeah, and we've got tombstones of guys who re-enlist again and again, who build up dozens of victories. Of course, the sad thing is, because it's a gladiator's tombstone, it actually ended in death.
Yeah, clearly. We kind of know the ending of that story. Then he retired to read books in the countryside. No, that's not a thing.
But that's the thing, is if you had retired, you'd got out the other end. Horace claims that some gladiators made enough money to buy big country estates. When you're setting up your tombstone all those decades later, having lived as a country gentleman for 10, 20, 30 years, you're not going to portray yourself as a gladiator.
Yeah, good
You'll
point.
portray yourself as a country gentleman. And, your shady past, albeit how you made your money, that'll be just quietly forgotten. You'll blend back into the more respectable society.
There are, I'm always fascinated by female gladiators as well, because there was a decree that was passed. I forgot who was the emperor at the time, that forbid women of high stature to be, to join the gladiatorial games. So if you're forbidding them, that means there must have been cases, right? Like that this was a thing, right?
It was a thing, and it attracts an awful lot of scholarship now, because gender and sexuality in the ancient world is kind of a big growth sub-industry in classical studies. It was a thing, but it was a very rare thing. And it's Septimius Severus who bans female gladiators.
That's what, yeah.
We only have one visual depiction of female gladiators, and they both have stage names, Amazonia and Achillea, the female version of Achilles. And it might be significant they're both topless. I think
Interesting.
And it might be significant that in literary accounts, female gladiators appear on the bill along with dwarfs fighting. I think they're kind of a novelty act.
Interesting.
It's really, for Romans, totally paradoxical. Look, it's women just doing something that men should do. Isn't that extraordinary? Rather than a mainstream sporting activity. And
it wasn't like a UFC women fight. It's like it wasn't an event. No.
I'm sorry to say, I think it was a novelty act. And
That's
because the guys putting on the games want novelty. It's not okay just to do bigger and more. You need to have something new, a new twist in your show to make it stand out from all the guys who've put on shows before you. And that'd be one way of doing it.
That would be one way of doing it. That's a great point. So this idea of Roman mind, I mean, it's like this central idea through the book. So what do these games reveal? Like, what is the Roman mind? Like, what conclusion did you arrive at after doing this research?
It's
such a big question.
It's just That's an enormous question.
Yeah,
Okay,
I know that's what it
I'll
was also
focus. I'll focus
and
it on.
now, boom,
Hell, you saved that one up.
to the end.
I think it actually, the arena, the amphitheater itself, reflects the whole of Roman society. It's people were seated according to social rank. So it's kind of like the Roman social pyramid, only tipped upside down. The nearer you are to the ring side, carefully protected, the more important you are in society. So obviously the emperor is pitch side in his own box. Then the senators on the lowest level. Above them, the equestrians, who are the second rank in society. Above them, the respectable plebs, the ones who can afford a nice toga. Above them, the sordid plebs who can't afford a nice toga. And right at the top, that's where you get slaves, women, foreigners. So it's kind of the whole of Roman society stratified in stone. And you can see at a glance where you are in society. It reinforces the boundaries of society. And it's also kind of a very visceral warning because there in the middle, out on the sands, are the outsiders, barbarian prisoners of war, criminals, and they're fighting for your entertainment and possibly dying. And at lunchtime executions, they certainly are dying. Not certainly, almost certainly dying. Some survive. So I think it actually is. It's a thing that reinforces Roman ideas about their own society, and it's like a mental map of the Roman Empire turned inside out. You've got a ring of a wall, like Hadrian's Wall, around the arena. You've got guards around it. And in the arena, you've got barbarity. In the stands, you've got civilization. It's kind of the donut effect of how they imagined the empire itself, ringed by defenses, guarded by soldiers, outside barbarians, inside civilization. It reflects that too. I think, yeah, it's very. I think the arena and gladiatorial combat operates in all sorts of ways to reflect the Roman mindset of their views on the world and how their society is structured and its place in the world.
In a sense, when you make documentaries or movies, there's always a trailer. If you were to take a reader and drop them anywhere in your book into one story to kind of give them like a vibe of what they're about to encounter when they start from page one, can you think of a place where you would drop that reader within your book?
Yeah, he said, playing for time, thinking, yeah, okay, this is a bit I really liked. It's the chapter, the section on dreams. We have this amazing book written in the 100s AD by a Greek called Artemidorus of Doldis, and it's a guide in how to be a dream diviner. And he claims he's gone out and he's collected examples, case studies of dreams. And of course, you can only dream about the stuff you can think about. So it's kind of a weird way into the Roman mind. And anyway, a lot of the dreams turn out to be about gladiators. And for the trailer bit, I'll go for his extended discussion on dreaming about fighting in the arena. If you're a young, unmarried man, the type of gladiator you're fighting reflects the character of the wife you'll marry. And really worryingly, for our timid daughters, the view of marriage, 8 out of the 9 types are really bad, and only one is good. But then again, he's a guy who has certain reservations about marriage. He does. If you dream of being crucified and you're an unmarried man, it means you'll get married because a husband is nailed to his wife just as a man is nailed to a cross. And you really don't want to. You don't want to dream of fighting a Retiarius, the one with the net and trident who runs around in the arena, because that means your wife will be utterly promiscuous and sleep with all your friends. I'm not sure that's a really representative sample of the book, but it is
No, but
really.
it definitely grabs your attention. That's for sure. I just heard a joke. So it was a comedian. I forgot the comedian's name, but he said something like, I used to, before I got married, I used to be really afraid of marriage. Especially when I learned that half of marriages stay together." And I was like, "Okay, that's a good one." My wife would appreciate that. I love my wife, so it's fine. But Oh my goodness. Well, anyway, Harry, this was a great interview. I really appreciate you taking the time. Thank you so much. And again, I can't recommend your book more. That's amazing. I'm sure everyone's going to enjoy it as much as I did.
Thank you so much. That was a really good, fun conversation. Thanks for having me on the podcast.